Okay, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to another segment of The Pulse here on Cayman Mall Road. Of course, as you all know by now, The Pulse is really all about keeping the community informed of everything that's going on here in the Cayman Islands. And we have the pleasure of being joined this afternoon by Mr. Alric Lindsay. Some of you may know him as a local attorney at law. And Alric is actually quite involved in the community, and I think you will be seeing a lot more of him here on Cayman Mall Road as we get to know him a bit better over the coming months. But Alaric has been one of those persons who has really been quite vocal on a number of topics, and the latest one being the redevelopment proposal for Smith Barcadere. I always want to say Brack when I say that word. So, Alaric, good afternoon and welcome to the Pulse here on Cayman Mall Road. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So, a lot of us, I think this project feels like it snuck up on us, and we're going to talk about some of the details of the historical development of the project here in just a minute. But you're a Caymanian, and of course, Smith Barcadere, most of us just call it Smith Cove, is one of those spots, especially if you're a Georgetowner, that a lot of us would have gone to, as young kids. I remember even before I left to move to the States, that and the port, what's now considered the port area, those were kind of like the two areas that as kids we could literally walk to, ride our bikes to, and just hang out, have a good frolic, especially on a Sunday afternoon. And it was just a good time for kids and parents and families. So, what are your fondest memories of the Smith Cove area?
Well, Smith Barcadere, for most of the people that grew up along Boilers Road, and I know you have family along that area as well, and also in the area of Windsor Park. The options that we had growing up were going up by the dock, and that area was called Negro's Bath Pan. That's not the correct word, but and we know what happened with Negro's Bath Pan. One day we went out there to swim, and the gate was locked. So all of a sudden we had this gate there that prevented us from going and jumping in the sea and swimming and doing all the normal things that kids would do. And it wasn't just the kids from Windsor Park and Boilers Road, it was the kids from Scranton, Harlem. And by blocking off that access to the water in Georgetown, what happened is the kids didn't have any other option, really. So you can imagine the implications of taking away a recreational activity that was normally freely available to low-income kids and giving them no other option to enjoy themselves on a Sunday or a Saturday. So that was one of the options that we had for going to the beach or going for a swim. That was Negro's Bath Pan. Now, the other option was you would go down to Smith Barcadere. And, if you had a bicycle, you were lucky, right? So, most of us would try to share a bike. So I would ride and I would have my friend on the handlebar. Of course, the police would always stop us for carrying our friends on the handlebar. But that was our way of getting there if you had a bike. Or you would jump on the back of your friend's bike, which had two pegs on the back wheel. So you jump on the back pegs, and that's how you would get to Smith Barcadere. And if you didn't have access to a bike, you had to walk. And so I had to walk quite a few times to Smith Barcadere. And so what you find is it's not just being at the beach, it's actually that journey to the beach. And when you think back about it, that relationship that you develop with all your friends from walking and talking, and while it might sound silly now when you look back, it's actually really important to build those relationships within your community with different types of people. And so when we got to Smith Barcadere, obviously there's a lot of kidding around, and I think that when we were young, we probably didn't appreciate the natural beauty and the importance of Smith Barcadere. And now that we're all older and it's still in sort of its natural state, we could actually just go there and totally reminisce about the good times that we had on that beach. And so you know, when you go to Smith Barcadere, there are actually two sections, two beaches basically. So when you enter Smith Barcadere, you see the main beach. It's not a huge property. I'm not trying to sell it as a huge property. But when you go in, you see the main beach. And then when you go around to the right, you have a smaller area, a smaller beach in that area as well. So when we got to Smith Barcadere, there used to be sort of a quay, a few, probably about 50, almost 100 feet out in the water. And we used to basically swim out to that area. And I think back then, there used to be some coral. Back then, I think so. And we used to swim out to that. And, you know, you just, as a child, you know, you just frolic and you sit there and you chat and, you know, when you get to the Iron Shore part of Smith Barcadere, there are areas that you can jump off from. And I mean, as a child, you don't think about the dangers of jumping off that area, but that's what we used to do, you know, as children. The same way we used to jump off the dock in Georgetown, we also jumped off the Iron Shore and Smith Barcadere. So there are a lot of really fun memories from being at Smith Barcadere. You know, you're building friendships, and those friendships continue today. And then when you sit down and you talk about the things that you did, you know, those are really fun memories. And if that whole feeling and the natural shape of the place is changed, or the natural look of the place is changed, then what sort of memories are we going to allow our children to develop? Are they going to get to know the same Smith Barcadere that we knew?
Right.
And I think that this is sort of one of the concerns that people have in the Cayman Islands, is that, or at least Caymanians have in the Cayman Islands, is that things seem to be changing so much and so quickly that we haven't had the time to sit down and say, where is it that we're actually going? And what type of Cayman do we actually want to see? And so if someone actually hit the stop button and said, like, hold on a minute, look at what Dr. Roy Borden has said, for whom are we building? If we hit the stop button and looked at that for a second and thought about it really, we seem to be hiring a lot of consultants from the outside to give us a perspective on the inside. And what naturally happens is that, you know, sometimes when we have consultants for projects, they know very little about the Cayman Islands or even the Caribbean. And so they tend to come to the Cayman Islands and interview Caymanians or Caymanian seamen or Caymanian experts. So what you have is outside consultants who may be paid $100,000, $500,000, whatever it is that they consult on a particular project. They tend to come in, not know much about the infrastructure, and then as a part of their research, they tend to get all of the answers from Caymanians who are on the ground, who are experts. And so it makes you think, why is it that the local experts and the local seamen, those older men who've been to sea and around the world, who've been experts and captains on ships, why is it that those people aren't consulted more frequently, as they have both that international experience at sea and they've also grown up in Cayman, and they have Cayman at heart, and they want to preserve Cayman and also offer that natural beauty to tourists that come to visit us. So I think that those are some of the things that we need to bear in mind while we develop. For whom are we developing?
Right.
And if we ever get into a situation where we call, you know, overdevelopment or, you know, overcrowding, if we ever get to that situation, then we're going to unfortunately see the negative impacts of that happening. So I think if we could sit down as a people, as a community, and plan what it is that we want to see in the future of Cape Ann, then I think with that planning, we could have a long-term plan, we could have a medium-term plan, but we need to plan in order to get the outcome that we desire.
Right. Now, I must say, our governments, generally speaking, seem to have the ability to do a lot of planning that I don't know how well it works out in the end in terms of actually amounting to a real plan in terms of execution. So we've got vision. What was it? What year was that vision? Was it 2020?
I think there was a vision 2008. I think there was.
There was a vision 2008. Yeah.
And I don't know what happened with that plan.
Right. So we get it done on paper. As you said, we hire a lot of consultants. That process certainly happens a lot. And we spend a lot of money. But then in real terms, we're still looking around going, well, what happened to that plan? Where are we? There's no follow-up. There's no continuity. And in some instances, there's absolutely no deployment at all. So let's look at the specifics. And you know, when you were talking just now about your memories of going to Smith Cove, Smith Barcadere area on the weekends with your friends, I always have a memory for some reason that sticks out in my head. I swear every single time we went, I came back with a buck toe. I don't know how that happened, but it just seemed to happen every single weekend, I swear. But, you know, we all have our memories in terms of, you know, whether it's with, in my case, with my sisters, kind of frolicking out there with their friends. Being the younger one, you know, I was always tagging along and trying to fit in and hang out and that sort of thing. So we all have those memories, and you're absolutely right. You know, there is a sense of nostalgia, and that we want to preserve not just the possibility of our kids having those same experiences and developing memories of their own, but also preserving the environment, because more and more we have an influx of tourists, and God knows we completely understand that tourism is one of our two pillars of the economy. We get that, and we rely heavily on it. There are restaurants and bars, and you know, there's a trickle-down effect of all of the people that feed off of that tourism dollar. Now, one of the ironic things in my research recently, even on the port, talking to people in Georgetown, I've had businesses say to me, listen, the numbers are up in terms of more people coming off of those cruise ships, but the value in terms of what we are actually earning is down. So we're not making more money just because we have more people coming off of the ships. The opposite seems to be happening. And I think there are a number of reasons why that's the case. So if we could explore, in your opinion, what happens with overdevelopment, over commercialization, and why those are two things that we have to be extremely cautious about when we're thinking about, you know, the natural progression of how we want to see the Cayman Islands going.
Well, I think there are a couple of things we need to bear in mind. Of course, tourism is a strong pillar of the economy. And of course, we want our bus operators and our tour guides to continue to earn money. You know, we want our hotels to send people to see different attractions. You know, we want total exposure to the products that we have in the Cayman Islands. And as you know, those products include all of the water sports. You know, we have those Crystal Caves at East End. You know, we have various other people in East End that are given local tours. For example, Shane Edwards also does those tours. And it's always good to actually have a local guide to give those tours. So bearing that in mind, I want to see Caymanian businesses continue to grow and continue to thrive. Unfortunately, what happens sometimes is the idea is sold that if more tourists go to a certain area, that will result in a particular Caymanian business getting more money. Now, sometimes that's true if the Cayman has a direct contact with a certain operator or directly with the cruise ship where the tours are being sold. However, what you actually may find happening is that if the the cruise line is aware that they can now sell tours to Smith Barcadere, what will happen is, if that is allowed, what will happen is you'll have a larger volume of people going to Smith Barcadere. And if you know that Smith Barcadere is a small property, you also have to understand that only a certain number of people could fit on that property. So what you have is a large volume of people going to Smith Barcadere, and if it is allowed, then the cruise lines may start to sell large tour packages to Smith Barcadere. If the cruise line is selling those packages, sometimes what happens is, let's say the cruise line sells the tour for $100. From my conversations with some of the Cayman operators on the ground, sometimes they're only getting $25 or $30 out of that $100. So you see, yes, a Cayman businessman might benefit, but the benefit is small compared to what the total value of the tour packages that could be sold by the ship. So if we go on the assumption that by doing this redevelopment of Smith Barcadere, if we go on the assumption by doing redevelopment, we're going to have a large number of tourists coming to the area, we have to think about what is the capacity of that area. And this is where the idea of overcrowding gets in, because if you know what the capacity is, and I'm not sure if capacity has been considered in these current plans, but if you know what the capacity is, then from common sense, if you put too many people in that area for the estimated capacity, then what's going to happen is you're going to lose the value of the tourist product for that particular area. So for Smith Barcadere, you know, if you put 1,000 people there, then what you have is the main beach and other small beach at Smith Barcadere both getting crowded. And if it's crowded, then two things happen. You can't move around. The other thing that happens is once that crowd leaves, they're in such a hurry to get back to the ship that it's possible they may leave garbage behind. So then you have this garbage pollution problem as well. And we don't seem to know what would be the plan. What is the management plan for that area? We don't know if there's a plan to manage the capacity so that it does not become overcrowded, and so that there's not garbage pollution and other types of pollution, and so that the tourist experience is not lost. And we can't just only think about a tourist experience. We have to think about what is the experience of residents. What's the experience of those people that live in that area, that have homes in that area, that have homes across the street from the beach? What will their experience change to, you know? So that's also my concern is, you know, will the large volume lead to more traffic, for example? And we know from past experience that even though there's a parking lot on the other side of the street, some people prefer to park on the double lines, the double yellow lines along the beach, because for some people it's just easier to park there. So I think the experience for residents may change as well, in terms of, you know, starting to block some of the roads with such a large volume of vehicles. And that is the case even if the parking lot that is set out in the drawings is built. Even if you built a parking lot there, an extra parking lot, you still have that problem with, if there is a large number of people and there's no management plan, then that overflow from the parking lot is going to go on the road. And if it goes on the road, of course that means that there's a traffic issue, there's a safety issue now for residents who live in that area. And not only is there a safety issue, then you may have a traffic congestion issue. So let's say you're going home for lunch and you work at one of the big law firms in the close to the area. You may not be able to get home for lunch like you planned, because there may be some mega ships in the area that day, and there may be, you know, 2,000 people or 1,000 people that they have sent on a tour to this area at Smith Barcadere. And so it also destroys or impacts negatively the experience of residents.
Yeah, and we seem to, in all of our plans, I think, even discussing the pier, for example, the port cruise berthing project, the last consideration down the line seems to be the quality of the experience that our visitors and even, like you said, our residents are then subjected to. And in my mind, quality should be at the very top of your list of the things that you're trying to encourage. So let's look at, by comparison, what's happening with the public 7 Mile Beach redevelopment, which the Dark Group has taken over. There were some protests, even in terms of them putting up that very sterile looking wall that doesn't really go with the feel of a beach, right? They've done some good things. I mean, the parking lot, I think, was one of the necessary improvements that is quite useful. Then we've got the little what do we call them? Porta potties looking craft makeshift houses that are so incredibly tiny. And supposedly vendors are going to be giving access to those to, sell their, whatever it is that they're selling, their goods, their crafts. But we posted it months ago and there was not a single person who actually thought, number one, that was really, and I was quite disappointed, I must say, in the Dark Group, because they tend to do things to a certain standard, but there somebody dropped the ball. And, no one thought, oh, these look great and they're of the appropriate size to be of any use to vendors. Everyone thought it was either a joke, that they were really porta potties, or maybe this is just a temporary solution and there's something else in the works. So we've developed that project and it's still ongoing to a large extent. But then the question becomes, I think government has this kind of concept in their heads, build it and the people will come, but you're building it and you're taking away the natural beauty of what nature has created and what's been there forever to put up your own structures. What do you think is motivating government's desire to design an over or redevelopment, as they want to call it, this specific area?
I think the overall perspective of government is to get as much money as they can from each area. So as much government would like as much people as possible to have a excursion to a place like Smith Barcadere, which is more like a private secluded beach. It's a different feel from 7 Mile Beach. So the idea is to provide an additional tourist product to tourists. It is not considering the implications or the impacts on residents. It is mainly to provide this additional tourist product and to encourage a larger volume of people to come to this area. The idea being, I think long-term the idea would be to introduce some sort of vendors to the area as well, because if you now have the large volume, I think that it's possible that the next idea that the government may have is to introduce vendors in that area as well. The same way that vendors are planned for 7 Mile Beach. So the structures, that are similar, that are planned for Smith Barcadere are, the cabanas, and there's supposed to be a new amazing looking entrance area and a viewing deck, apparently, according to the drawings. I just think that Caymanians would not have asked for those things to enjoy Smith Barcadere better. Caymanians would have probably asked for an enhancement that allowed the natural beauty and the natural state of that property to remain. If we start putting offices and big car parks and amphitheater looking objects, viewing decks, if we start putting all these other things, then we're trying to make a place to attract someone else. So if it is being sold as if it is an improvement and an improvement in for the quality of enjoyment of that property for Caymanians. If that is the sales pitch, then that sales pitch is not working, because the types of things that are being thrown into the drawings, they don't coincide with what you would expect Caymanians to want for the enjoyment of Smith Barcadere.
Okay, that's very interesting. Talking about earlier the potential environmental footprint, the over usage and overcrowding of that particular beach would have. It was quite ironic for me to learn that environmental funds were actually used to purchase the land. But as you have just pointed out, there appears to have been this lack of consultation with the Caymanian populace, the voters, who really should have a say in how their country and their neighborhoods and their beaches are developing.
So apparently, let's take it back to December. So in December 2019, a procurement offer or a tender was issued, and that tender issue was for the redevelopment of Smith Barcadere. And so you have to understand how some of these proposals are issued. They're giving people a chance to submit an offer within a certain period of time. However, in this case, this was published around the end of December. So end of December, everyone is just getting over Christmas, and everyone is planning their New Year's party. A lot of people weren't even aware of this tender procurement offer being issued in December 2019. So a lot of people weren't even aware. So in January, I think that someone became aware that the deadline for questions, because when you look at the tender or procurement on the Cayman Bonfire Hub website, they will give you details like opening date, closing date for questions and answers. And I think what happened in this case was the closing date for questions and answers was in January 2020. And so by the time people became aware of the project, the question and answer period was about to close. And in my view, what happened is that a lot of residents, including some of the prominent residents who have properties in the Smith Barcadere area, and also all the concerned citizens, started to raise questions about different aspects of the project, including lack of what it appears to be lack of accessibility considerations for the elderly and disabled. So different groups began to look at the design that was on this Cayman Bonfire website and started to ask questions. So in my view, what occurred is that there seems to be an initiative to push this through quickly and get the project started and get it done before anyone had a real say. And why I say this is that if you look at the timing, end of December, the tender being issued, and end of December being a period where people are not really going to be focusing on any serious contract, any government contract. So if you think about the timing, end of December, going into the new year, a few days after the new year, a week after the new year, people are still recovering from their New Year's events and coming back from vacation, from visiting their families overseas. So within the first 2 weeks of January, no one is really thinking about, any huge government project and what the impact is going to be and whether they had an opportunity to be consulted. So from what I understand, there may be a small private internal team that may have, looked at the aspects of this project and who were trying to get it through, or a committee, a team or a committee who were trying to get this through. But I think what happened is that 2 weeks into January 2020, when more people got an opportunity to see the procurement plan, the tender offer on the Cayman Bonfire website, and when more people started to see the extent of the redevelopment and started to see that this redevelopment would threaten the natural beauty and the expectations of Caymanians going to enjoy Smith Barcadere, those people started to call into the talk show, started to write letters to the newspaper, started to contact the representative. And I think that at that stage, and at that stage only, did it get the government's attention. And when it got the government's attention, I think it seems to me that's when the government decided to react to the opinions and the concerns of the public.
Right.
So what should have happened is there should have been a wider consultation from the beginning. And had there been a wider consultation from the beginning, then the representative would not be getting the type of pressure that the representative is getting.
Yeah.
And I know that the representative is planning to, do
A talk show circuit now.
a talk show circuit, and has done something in relation to, I think Cayman 27 covered something some time ago as well on some sort of meeting. But the reality is that the idea seems to be, let's try to get the project done as quickly and quietly as possible with this small team. And when we get it done, then we can all put our names on it, I put this plaque here, I did this project. And the issue is that it's not about one person becoming famous or, having a plaque and their name attached to a development which is estimated to cost between $500,000 to anywhere up to $2 million. We don't have all the details, but that's my understanding from talking to various people who are close to the project. So we're talking about $500,000 to $2 million that could be allocated somewhere else. I mean, I'm not responsible for the allocation, but when I look at the things that are happening in my community, for example, where there may be unemployment, where the elderly don't have sufficient pensions, where kids are going to school without sufficient lunch money. When we think about things like that, that if we can allocate proper funding to those types of things, that could result in less suffering for elderly and more activities for children and more opportunities for Caymanians. When we think about those things, where money could be allocated, and then when we look at where the money is actually being allocated in order to establish the political legacy of someone else or a team or whatever it is, then I think there's an issue, there's a concern about, again, the same question that Dr. Roy Borden raised, for whom are we building? We're coming back to the same question. After each round of questions, after each project, we're coming back to the same question. And so initially, I believe, and I could be wrong, initially I believe there was only consultation amongst a small group of people, a small team of the people and the committee close to the project. And when the public became more aware of the details and started to lash out at the government for not having a wider consultation, I think that's when the government decided to react.
And talk to the people.
Exactly. So I wish that we could get to a stage where we appreciate that Caymanians are smart people, that Caymanians are not the same Caymanians of 30 years ago, where you may not have had the internet, you may not have had social media, you may not have been able to research detailed information that you can research now. So I think that's one of the things that the government has not appreciated, is that a lot of young people, they can just go on the internet and download comparable projects and look at what's being done here and look at the dangers and the possible impacts and negative consequences. So we have so much more information available to us publicly that we didn't have 30 years ago. So I think this idea of rushing projects and doing it quietly and not letting people know, those days are over, you know? And I think that, you know, going forward for projects, I think that the government is going to have to consider giving a wider consultation and not think that having a wider consultation is going to delay the execution of a project. I understand the idea of providing more things for tourists to do and more things for residents to do, but don't promote that part of it to get people comfortable with the project when your real objective is to just make cash or to establish a political legacy and put your plaque, your name plaque on the project.
Very interesting. Wow, wow. This is quite I think a topic that hopefully we'll have some additional conversation on. One of the interesting things as you were talking about the timeline that also occurred to me is the fact that in the midst of this, you know, project being put out there for bidding, there was also the back and forth with the potential referendum. That was delayed, but then there was the legal wrangling. So a lot of people were focused on that, on the cruise birthing process and where that was going, with the court battle and the judicial review, and every story was covering that, but we really weren't paying attention to this at all. Like, this really, in my opinion, went under the radar for probably 95% of the people that live in the Cayman Islands, and I dare say 95% of the people that live in that specific area of South Sound that would be impacted by this project.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think most people were waiting for what would be declared as referendum day, and most people were thinking about the cruise berthing facility expansion. They were thinking about what is going to be the result of the court case, and is it going to be a positive result? And, you know, hopefully it will be a positive result. But I think people were thinking about those things and preparing to cast their vote in respect of the expansion to the cruise berthing facility. And the same issues, actually, the same concerns arose with the cruise berthing facility because, again, people didn't feel that there was wide consultation in the beginning, and then you have concerned citizens and other groups that, you know, really picked up the ball on this, not dropped the ball, but picked up the ball and said, you know, well, what's really happening here? And as a result of those groups and concerned citizens asking questions, and they have a right to ask questions because public funds were being used to market the project and promote the project. The public funds were not being used to educate the project on the pros and cons. They were only being used to educate the public on the perceived pros from the government perspective because they had in their minds what they wanted to do and get it done as quickly as possible. And so you would have thought that the government would have learned a lesson from going through the whole cruise berthing facility referendum process. You would have thought they've learned that lesson and said, listen, we love Cayman. We care about Caymanians. We care about the impacts, negative or positive, on Caymanians, on residents, on visitors. We care about those things. So let's just have a wide consultation on, you know, this next project, you know. And, you know, it is important. When you look at such a small area like Smith Barcadere, you may not think that it has any sort of rich heritage, but it does. You know, when you speak to some of the older captains, you learn about that area being where one of the first schooners, seagoing vessels, was constructed, and that being sort of a trading point for, you know, Cayman seafarers. So when you look at that, I mean, the first seagoing vessel being built in Smith Barcadere, it's a pretty significant topic. And if you're now going to change that memory and change that heritage into a commercialized looking project, then you're pretty much deleting the heritage from the memory of our children, because they're going to see this new development, you know, amphitheater looking, arch in the front, deck, new office area, cabanas everywhere. You know, they're going to be seeing that rather than the natural state. It's like they're going to be going to a club rather than going to a park, you know. So it really changes the entire experience, and it exchanges the types of memories that they're going to share with their children, which are, of course, your grandchildren.
Yes. Okay, one final point, and again, our viewers are going to be watching this via our live stream and our various social media platforms. I have seen some critics comment on this on social media saying, listen, that first there was the cruise birthing project and the CPR group really coming out quite strongly against that entire process. Now the government is trying to do something else with the redevelopment of Smith Barcadere. And it seems like there are just people out there who don't want government to develop any projects or to do anything. And that was one of the arguments that I saw put forward on a social media platform. How would you respond to people who feel that way, that the Caymanian people just want to remain stagnant, and especially when it comes to their tourism product, don't have a desire to develop it any further?
I think Caymanians have a desire to develop the tourism product, but I think Caymanians want that development to have some sort of balance. So what you don't want is, what we discussed earlier, is you go beyond what your capacity is, and then your capacity destroys the tourist experience. You can destroy the tourist experience and you destroy the resident experience, and then what happens then? Then you lose the tourism. The tourism goes somewhere else. So we have to bear that in mind. And with regard to, you know, the question that was raised on social media, first of all, I think that everyone has that opportunity to freely express themselves. And I think that's so important in the Cayman of today, because if you think about the Cayman when I was in high school in early 1990s, the Cayman in those days, the Caymanians were reluctant to speak publicly. Cayman would send a letter to the Compass or other newspaper saying, I can't remember, did it used to say anonymous or name? There was some phrase that people used to use where they did not add their name to published letters. And so we're going from an environment where Caymanians felt in the past that they couldn't have a public opinion and they couldn't attach their name to a letter they put in the paper. They're afraid to go on the radio. To now where social media has really taken over and people are becoming more and more aware of their rights. And we mustn't be distracted by the sales pitch. The sales pitch is that, you know, the people that are expressing their opinions are delaying projects. It's not that the people that are expressing opinions are delaying projects. They're expressing their opinions because they understand what their rights are. But the Cayman before, they didn't really understand what their rights are. They didn't understand they had the freedom of speech. They didn't understand that if they got together as a community and as a group and spoke out as one, that could cause the government or someone else to take them seriously. Without being outspoken and speaking in connection with their right to speak and their freedom to speak, without that happening, then, you know, we're no different than the other governments that we criticize for being socialist or communist or being under some other system. We're no different from them if we treat our people this way, where they're being victimized for having a free speech. So it's not that Caymanians don't want any sort of development or any sort of new tourist attraction. It's not that. It's that they now understand what their rights are. They now understand that they can speak out against certain things, and they can do so as a group without being victimized. And in the event that someone tries to victimize them, they know they have a right to take legal action. That is the Cayman of today. And so if there's a perception that acknowledging your right and exercising your right is somehow a bad thing, then that is just a perception. And we respect each person's view, each person's perception, and we just sort of, we have that discussion, we agree to disagree, or we agree, and we just move on. I think that is the Cayman going forward. Having facts, having information, making decisions based on, making informed decisions based on information you've been able to access. And as I said before, a lot more information is available now. So the person who made the comment on social media is perfectly right, and free to make the comment. It may seem like Caymanians don't want certain things to happen, or it may seem that Caymanians are all of a sudden against everything the government is doing. But the fact is, Caymanians are not against everything the government is trying to do. Caymanians just want the government to hear their voice.
Okay, just a final point then. People who want more information on this project, can you share where they can get information, how they can go about contacting you even, what resources are available for them to reach out to their government representatives, and basically how do they get their voice to be heard?
Well, one of the things that we're doing is there's a group of concerned citizens and residents in the area, and other people across Cayman that have Cayman at heart. We're going to do a peaceful protest picnic, and that's going to be held on the 15th of February 2020 from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. at Smith Barcadere. So we're inviting friends, family, everyone to come out and just learn more details about this project. And we're hoping that the representative will attend, and we hope that certain members of government will attend, so that the government itself could clarify what parts of the project they think can still go forward, even though they're members of the public and concerned citizens that think that is going to negatively impact the area or negatively impact our tourism product. We need to know from this type of gathering and other types of gatherings in the future where our concerns are being aired and where our rights are being exercised. We need to know if the government is going to respect our wishes. Because if the government doesn't respect our wishes, and those wishes are in the best interest of the country as a whole, then we need to have another discussion about who is representing us.
And who is the representative for that area, just so that we're clear?
The representative for that area, I think, is Miss Barbara Connolly.
Okay. So that's Georgetown South.
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, folks. I know Barbara is readily available on her social media platforms. And I think she may have an office. I can't remember if she's a consular. I think she is. So she's got an office right there by the four-way stop as well in Georgetown. And of course, you can always reach her at the standard government email address, which would be barbara.connolly@gov.ky. So, Alric, thank you so much for joining us today for this discussion. We have spent the last almost 50 minutes going through and trying to educate the people about the importance of Smith Barcadere, giving them a little bit about the rich Caymanian maritime history that location has, why they should be concerned about this project, which seemed to have gone under the radar for most people, and finally how they can have their voices heard with at least one upcoming protest picnic slated for February the 15th.
Yes.
And of course, I've seen it already circulating on social media. How can people contact you if they wish to reach out to you for additional information?
You can contact me at 926-1688, or you can email me at alric@caymanfs.com.
All right. So again, folks, this is Alric Lindsay. A lot of you may know him from the last election. He actually ran, was it Georgetown South as well?
Yes.
This would have been your area of concern.
Yeah.
So quite timely in terms of that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in this evening. We're going to have a lot more sit-down chats with Alric because he has a lot of very interesting things that I think the people would love to hear about, his thoughts, trying to garnish public opinion and some other topics. So thanks for tuning in to another segment of The Pulse here in Cayman Mall Road. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you guys later in the week. There's a couple big things coming up this week that we're going to be keeping an eye on for you, including some court-related matters. So do make sure that you're locked in right here to Cayman Mall Road.